What's up, guys? Sorry. So, as promised, I wanted to come on and do part two of the book review. I didn't mean to rhyme all like that. But anyway, I wanted to do part two of the book review. The book finally came, and you guys can see it is a doozy, too. It's a pretty thick book. It's really pretty, too. I'll talk more about that afterwards. But I wanted to kind of do this in chunks. So, the first thing I want to do is kind of clear up. Um, a confusion that I did in the first review. So I didn't forget, but when I was talking about Tupac getting shot, I think I mixed up the when he last got the second time he got shot when he passed away with the first time. So I talked about the unnamed guy that she was dating, who she didn't really get into detail about. And I talked about how he was jealous and possessive or whatever. And when Tupac got shot the first time and she was going to check on him, the guy got upset about that. Um, so that was the first time. And then the second time, when Tupac got shot and ultimately perished, she was with Will already at this point. So I did get those two stories mixed up. I forget how I said it, but excuse me, I think I even confused myself when I was talking about it. So I just wanted to make that disclaimer and clear that up. I was trying to see if there was anything else that I needed to clear up from the first one. I did take a couple of little notes just because I wanted to make sure that I didn't mix up anything. Yeah, and then also when Tupac got shot, he got shot when he ultimately passed. Jada talked about the fact that they hadn't talked, I guess, in about a year or so that she hadn't talked with him. They got into a disagreement and ended up not talking for like over a year. So when he was shot and killed, or when he was shot, they weren't speaking. And then I think by the time I don't think she got to the hospital to see him before he passed away. And then I did see some conversation about, I guess, she was saying that Suge Knight, or somebody mentioned the fact that Suge Knight had Tupac's ashes, and there was a lot of conversation about that. What she said was she was at Tupac's parents or mother's house, and Suge Knight brought the ashes. So I guess he probably picked them up, but he brought the ashes to Tupac's mother's house. And Jada just happened to open the door. And she talked about being really angry with Suge Knight. Like she never really liked him. So I think that was kind of an awkward thing for him to come and bring the ashes of Tupac, especially with her believing that he had something to do with Tupac's murder. So that was that about that. Oh, and I forgot to mention in the last video that she talked about the first time when Tupac was in jail. Um, she talked about how he wrote her a letter, and this was I think this last time he was in jail because I don't know if he was in jail a couple times. Well, when he was in jail, he wrote her a letter, and he wrote it out to or sent it to Jada Corinne Shakur. So I guess that was his way of, she said that he, talked about wanting to marry her because she was always there for him, and he just I guess loved her for that or whatever. But she never talked anymore about. Obviously, they didn't get married, and then they shortly after that kind of got into the disagreement because he signed with Suge Knight, and then that's when they kind of got into their disagreement and didn't speak for a while. So that was that about that. I think that was all I had to clear up from about part one. So now jumping into part two of the book. Now, as I said, this is a doozy of a book, and I listened to it on. I think I told you guys I listened to it on Audible because the book took too long to come in, and but it's still a super long book. So if you want to read it, have at it. Um, so let's jump into part two. I think when I left you guys off, she was just meeting Will, or they were either she was just meeting him, or they had already got engaged. So when they got engaged, they were planning to get married. The mother, Jada wanted to just go somewhere and get married. The mother was like, "No, you guys need to have a wedding. You're my only child. I want you to have a wedding." So they ended up, having a wedding. But before the wedding, you guys know Will was coming out of recently divorced Cherie, I think, who was his son's mother. And so Will's people was like, "You need to get a um, what is it called? A prenup." And Jada was like, "If we're going into this marriage already talking about the end, then I don't think we need to get married." And he was like, "You're right." She was like, "I'm not going anywhere," essentially, is what she told him. And so from there, they decided not to get a prenup or whatever. But those were the words she also used to say why she stayed in the marriage for so long, or why she continues to stay in the marriage, I guess. But nonetheless, so we talked about her and Will getting married. She talked more about her struggle with depression. She kind of started off as well. I think I mentioned when the book first started, she talked about being at the bottom of the driveway of the spiritual healer who she was going to go see. And so she kind of starts back off at that point while she was at the bottom of the driveway and why she was there. Apparently, she had a friend who had went through this kind of treatment. It was like a 3-day intense. I think it's called ashawaga or something, some kind of plant or something that I guess you take or whatever. I don't know, but it's some kind of spiritual or not spiritual, some kind of psychedelic kind of thing, but it's supposed to have like the spiritual component, I guess, when you do it with a spiritual guru or whatever. I don't know. But anyway, she was at the bottom of the driveway preparing to go into this woman's house to do this spiritual practice or whatever. And so she talked about that. Um, and she's, kind of shared her experience with it. It wasn't nothing really interesting. So she kind of shared her experience with that. Um, what else? What else? What else? And I'm jumping around because I'll get to my final thoughts, but I'll tell you why I'm jumping around. But so she talked about that. She talked more about the movies that she did and the different people that she met and the different things that those people introduced her to. For example, she talked about doing The Matrix and, of course, how that was Will's movie initially. He was supposed to be what's the character that Lawrence Fishburne played. I can't remember the name of the character that Lawrence Fishburne played, but Will was supposed to play that character. And I think Will was either working on something else or something was going on, but he didn't want to do it. So she looked at the script and she was interested in, I think, in the character Trinity. She went out for the role, but there was no chemistry between her and Keanu Reeves. But they ended up offering her, I guess, whatever role, whatever part she played in the Matrix. But she talked about a conversation that she was having with Keanu Reeves about like what does she do after the movie and how does she, continue to tap into her creativity. And she knew that he was in a band and music was something that was always important to her. And so she wanted to kind of do something with the music. And specifically, she wanted to go into like rock music, which was something that she said, she hadn't seen a lot of Black women do. So there weren't very many examples, especially in the US. I think she quoted a couple of women who were, I think, overseas or something, who were like, in rock bands or whatever. So she talked about her experience with that. I think her band was Wicked Wisdom. So she talked about her experience with that and how important that was to her and all that stuff. Um, she talked about the movie. I was trying to remember the movie that she did with Jamie Foxx and Tom Cruise. I can't remember the name of the movie, but that was a good one too. So she talked about doing that movie and she talked about how her and Tom Cruise had become friends after that. And I guess he kind of introduced her to Scientology. And she said, although she was never interested in becoming a Scientologist, she definitely studied the materials or whatever, always with the understanding and making it known that she was not interested in becoming a Scientologist or joining the Scientology or whatever. Um, and that's going to kind of come back. In fact, I'll just jump into it. So when she was studying with the Scientology in the same time frame, her dad, who she hadn't really had a really good relationship with or had a relationship with at all, really, he kind of came back in her life. Her brother was telling her that he had went back to Baltimore and I guess he was, doing drugs again. And the brother was like, if you don't help, if you don't get involved, then he's definitely going to die of drugs. And so she said she brought him out to LA or California where he got to and she put him in a drug rehab, which was I think it was a drug rehab, some kind of way affiliated with the Church of Scientology. So he went through the drug rehab program, got fully clean. She said, he was back to his normal self, looked great, sound great, was very clear. He was doing really good, and he came to her one day and was like, "Hey, I'm not going to go back to." So after he finished the drug rehab program, I guess he stayed on to continue with the Scientology training or teaching or whatever. But she said one day he came back to her house and he was like, "Hey, I'm not going to go back to Scientology to do anything there." He was like, "And I want you to not be a part of that either." And she's like, "Well, it's already clear I'm not going to be a part of Scientology. I'm just going to study the materials." And he was like, "Yeah, definitely don't." And she said he didn't really get into why, he was leaving and why he was adamant about her not being a part of it. So he ended up leaving or whatever. But she said, meantime, years had passed, but then he ended up getting back on drugs. And once he got back on drugs, he was still in California. She was still kind of paying for, his lifestyle and all that. And she was like, "Look, if you're not going to get clean and get off the drugs, then you might as well go back to Baltimore." And so he was really upset with her, ended up going back to Baltimore, and ultimately he did pass away from a drug overdose. And she was like, she kind of made peace with that, understanding that everybody has their own journey. So she didn't really feel guilty for it or anything like that. She just looked at it as like that was his journey, that was the path he took, and may God bless him. Was kind of her position. And I'm flying through this guy because I want to get to my final thoughts. Honestly, there was one part where she talked about being a mother, and to be honest, I thought that part was so beautifully written. Everything about it was really, really, it was believable. It felt very authentic. It was written beautifully. I actually cried in that part where she was talking about, being a mother and how, giving birth, to her children and just the joy and love that they bring to her life. I thought that was really a beautiful, I guess a beautiful chapter or chapters that she talked about. Um, and I'm going to talk about the three things or four things I think that people are really interested in before I get to like my final thoughts, because I think everything else, well, I'll talk about more in the final thoughts. So let me get to the four things that we're interested in. You're interested in the her separation with Will that she talked about, interested in the entanglement, interested in the red table talk that she had with Will after the entanglement, and the slap. So I'll talk about those four pieces really quickly. So she did mention that her and Will were separated in 2016. But throughout the book, she really did not talk about Will very much at all, which was really surprising to me. Um, she probably talked about Tupac, honestly, more than she talked about anybody else in that book. And definitely more than she talked about Will. So I thought that was really interesting. Even when she talked about Will, I didn't find her talking about him. It wasn't like when she talked about Tupac, it was very admirable. Um, like he just could do, like it was just, you can just hear it in the tone. Like I told you guys, I listened to it on tape as well, but you can just hear it in her tone. It was just a different kind of energy that she used when she was talking about Tupac compared to when she was talking about Will. But she did talk about how she was kind of struggling, like with depression and struggling with being happy, and she felt like, I think she was losing herself in like this big time celebrity husband. They had different ideas of what their lives should look like with, regards to being this powerhouse Hollywood couple. Will was very much in, the snoozing and partying, and not partying, but kind of being in the mix with the people. And she just really didn't want to do all of that. So there was a lot of issues with that. So they were always just kind of, be just couldn't see eye to eye with regards to that. Will's idea was, I want to be as famous as I can be. I want to make as much money as I can make. I want to be as successful as I can be. And that was it. And her thing was kind of like, she wasn't really like feeling the Hollywood stuff. So she felt like he was doing too much. He felt like she wasn't doing enough, essentially. And those are my words, not hers. And so I think from that is where they kind of had the problems. And so over the years, she just struggled to feel happy. She struggled to feel connected with not just Will, but she's, kind of struggled with life. She was saying the only thing that really gave her joy and happiness was her children. And so she took really, a lot of pride in them and the things that they were desiring to do. I enjoyed her approach to parenthood in this regard, where she talked about, she recognized that her children had their own journeys to go on. And so she just kind of really cultivated the different things that they were interested in. I thought that was interesting. And I love their children. I think their children are beautiful. Um, I'm, encouraged that they will be great people as they continue on this journey. So where other people may feel like, and I've heard it before, and she actually kind of mentioned it, where people didn't like her parenting style. Um, I don't know all of it. I don't even know what she shared in the book, and she didn't share a lot. Like I heard somewhere that I guess with her son, that somebody was saying like she had gave him mushrooms or something. I don't know if that's true. She didn't mention anything like that in the book. Everything that she mentioned in the book was really just supportive of her children, supportive of their personal expression, supportive of their dreams and their goals. And so, I was really excited to hear the parts about her talking about her children. I also really enjoyed the parts where she talked about her career. Like I said in the first video, she did not do a movie that I didn't like. Like some of my top favorite movies she was in. So she was definitely a great, had a great career, I think, as an actress. And she probably could have continued. I don't know what happened, but I think a lot of it had to do with kind of like that internal voice or that self doubt or whatever. So almost like self sabotage. I feel like just listening to her talk about those years is kind of what I got from that. So in fact, she did concur that her and Will had been separated since 2016. And in fact, she lived with her mother for a while until she got her own place. So then she ended up getting her own place. And that's kind of where she was living. Now, with the entanglement, when I tell you she talked about this thing for 30 seconds, she did not talk about that at all. Like, those are the things I thought she would do more to clear up. So essentially, she did clear up. She said, just to be clear, this wasn't my son's best friend. She said, just to be clear, he did mention to me that he was having mental health issues, or that he was having physical health issues, and then also some childhood trauma issues. She said August Alsenia, whatever his name is, mentioned that to her. And she said, and when I used the word entanglement, she defined what entanglement was, and that was it. So she didn't say that there was a relationship. She didn't say that, what the details or the extent of the relationship. She didn't say any of that. Um, and then she did say, when it ended, she said it ended 2 years before he actually mentioned it. And so it was over. She had moved past it. And so when he mentioned it, it was kind of like, why are you mentioning it? This is over. So, so that was that about that. So she didn't feel like there was anything that she needed to address. And she also said that she felt like, she said she also felt like, I'm sorry, she also felt like if she addressed it in the media, then it would just gave more energy to it. So she really didn't want to address it, but they decided that she would address it and that she would do it on Red Table Talk. And she said she was going to do it by herself, but then Will was like, I want to be a part of it. I want to show that I support you or whatever. Now, before I get into that, just a real quick thing. She was saying that she didn't feel like, or that whatever she had, that entanglement wasn't, how did she say it? It wasn't, she didn't use the word affair. She never used the word like that. She was just saying the entanglement wasn't like betrayal. And that might be my word, but something like betrayal. And her reasoning was, one, because her and Will had already been separated. And then she said, two, because they had an understanding, not an open relationship. She was like, they had open communication, is what she said. And she was like, a lot of people felt like it was an open relationship. And she was like, no, it's not an open relationship. It was open communication, which meant that if something happened, then they would be honest with each other and say, this is what happened. So her point was that whatever happened with her in August, she had already shared it with Will 2 years ago before before August mentioned it to the world, and they had moved past it. And so in that regard, she didn't feel like there was any deception or betrayal because they just had this open communication. So that was that with that. So when they did the Red Table Talk, she said that that was the only time she was going to address it. And Will said he wanted to be a part of it. So she kind of prefaced was like, so let me be clear. We recorded it late at night. We had already broke the set down for the season. So they spent the day rebuilding the set, even though it was done at her house. Spent the day rebuilding the set. And Will was like, he wanted to be a part of it, but he had just come in from, I think, filming or whatever. And so when he came in, she said he was tired, but they had a long day. So his eyes were red. Like his eyes wasn't red because he was crying. She was like, his eyes was red because, he had a long day. And then it was going into the wee hours of the night because they were still trying to set up. And so when they were having a conversation, she said that she talked about the part where, I guess towards the end, where Will was like, trying to get her to say, he was like, well, what was it? When she was like, and it was an entanglement. He was like, no, what was it? Like, it was like he was trying to get her to say that she had an affair. But she was surprised that he kept pushing like that. Then she was also, I guess, kind of surprised when he was saying something about, okay, yeah, I'm going to get you back too. And she was like, you already did. So I don't know what that meant. But she said after the Red Table thing, like that was like her and Will really kind of got into it because she felt like he was trying to throw her under the bus and act like he was just like this, helpless husband who's, adulterous wife, just embarrassed him in front of the world kind of thing. And so she said a couple other friends. So she was really upset with him after that. And she said how some of her other friends came and kind of, talked her, I guess, try to help her to see it differently or whatever. But she said Will was apologetic. He, kind of felt like that wasn't what he was trying to put out there. And that, that was pretty much it for that. Then the slap. Hold up. So we talked about the separation from will, the entanglement, the red table, and the slap. So the slap is the last thing I'll talk about. So with the slap, she said that again, her and Will had already been separated. She the only reason that she came to the Oscars was just to support him. She said she wasn't going to go otherwise. She talked about she was supposed to have not a part in, but she was supposed to, I guess, a producer role or producing role in King Richard. And I don't know what happened, but she ended up not doing that project. And Will really wanted her to be a part of it. She was like, "No, I don't want my name on something that I wasn't a part of." So she didn't get the producer credit. But nonetheless, she, was excited for Will. She thought it was a great movie. She was excited for the cast, excited for the movie, excited for the nomination. So she wanted to be there to support him. And so that's why she was there. Oops, sorry, guys. Sorry, Boozy. And that's why she was there. So she says, from her angle, she couldn't see, like she could see Will going up there. Look, before we even get there, she was like, so she had on this beautiful green dress. She said the dress was super heavy. So, it took a lot to get it on, a lot to move around. So she wasn't as agile, I guess, is the point she was trying to make. So she said she's sitting in this, sitting in the chair with this this heavy dress on, heavy green dress on. And she said, and Chris Rock comes out, and she was like, and she kind of knew, she was hopeful that Chris wouldn't say anything. She was like, he had been, coming at her, every award show, he had something to say about her. So she was kind of hoping that he didn't do anything tonight. She said they had an incident where she was boycotting the Oscars. Remember that Oscars so white, and that particular night or that particular Oscar, Chris Rock was the one that was hosting. And so I think she said she reached out to Chris Rock and was like, "Yeah, hey, I just want to let you know I'm not going to be there." Why she thought she needed to tell him this, I don't know. But nonetheless, she said she called him, reached out, and was like, "Hey, I want to let you know I'm not going to be there. I'm boycotting, whatever. But if, you're the best person to host it, under these conditions or something like that." And so she was like, "So good luck or whatever kind of thing." And she was like, "I don't know if he took it like she was being facetious or if she was, kind of poking him or whatever." She was like, "But of course, that night at the Oscars, he talked about the fact that she was boycotting or whatever." And she said in every award show, he takes, opportunity to poke at her. So this particular night, she said she hadn't seen Chris in a while, and she was kind of hopeful that maybe he wouldn't take this as an opportunity to poke at her. But she said, but of course, and Chris Rock's style and fashion, he starts going in on an audience, and he sees her, and he talks about her hair, and we all know what happened. So she was like, from where she was sitting, she couldn't tell. Well, she said, well, from where she was sitting, she was like, when Will went up there, she said she couldn't tell, like she thought it was a joke. She thought it was a prank. She said throughout the night, Will had continued to go back, I guess, behind the set and all this stuff. So he wasn't in his seat. He just kept kind of getting up and going out of the seat. And she said, so she thought at some point he must have went out there, talked with Chris Rock and said, when you come out, we're going to do this. So she said she totally thought it was a prank. And she said from where she was sitting, she couldn't tell. Like she seen Will go up there, and she said she couldn't tell if he actually connected. So she thought it was just like he went up there, kind of did this, this display, ha ha, and came back down. And she was like, but when he started walking back, she said she made eye contact. And that's when she realized, like, okay, like he's not playing. And she said, and then when he starts yelling, "Keep my wife's name," she was like, "Oh, okay, he's really not playing." And she said that she reached for his hand. I don't remember that, but of course I didn't see it from every angle. But she said she reached for his hand to try to calm him down, even though, as she said, they weren't together. And she said she was really surprised at the fact that he said "my wife." She said because he hadn't called her his wife in years because they had been separated since 2016. So, so she says, well, while he's sitting there, um, Chris Chris Rock, I guess Chris Rock continues with the show, whatever. She said then when a commercial came, like when it was commercial for us, she said Chris Rock came to like the end of the stage and was like, "Jada, I'm sorry. Like I really didn't mean any harm." And she was like, "Chris, this ain't the right time." She said, and Will starts yelling at him again. So Will was tight. So she says, and then, Denzel and Bradley Cooper, I think she said, kind of came over and talked with him and, was trying to help calm him down. She said that Lapita, is her name Lapita? Came, reached over and was like, "Are you okay?" And she was like, "Yeah." She said Tiffany Haddish, Queen Latifah, and a couple other people came down and, kind of checked on her to see if she was okay. And she was like, "Yeah." And she was like, but she just kind of took the position like, "All right, I have to support Will. Like, I'm going to stand by him or whatever. I'm not going to defend him, but I'm going to stand by him," is what she said. So she said her publicist or his publicist came over and was like, "Yeah, Chris Rock has already left and he's not going to press charges." And so I guess they knew that that night. So Jada was like, "Press charges," you know. And even at this point, she's like, "I still didn't realize that he actually connected." And she said, so she literally looked at Will and said, "Did you hit him?" And she said, Will was like, "Yeah." So, but she did say, in Will's defense, she said that he had just come off of taping what was the movie he did, Emancipation, and she said so that took a lot out of him. He was I guess, mentally, emotionally was still kind of, getting out of the slave movie thing, whatever that did for him. So that was her kind of disclaimer for why he did it. But she still said, she was like, she didn't push him to do it. She didn't encourage him to do it. Again, this is her words. All I can tell you is what she told us, yeah. But she was like, she didn't tell him to do it. She didn't, encourage him to do it or anything. Just like he just did it on his own. And she's like, but of course, the news reports is going to be, oh, Will, demanding, bullying wife or whatever made him, smack Chris Rock. So she was like, she was really shocked and surprised and saddened even by everybody's response and how they tried to put the blame on her. And I was like, I can feel that. I can dig that. But I'll tell you, the footage from the slap, did not really, in my estimation, and from the vantage point that I had, didn't really support a lot of what she said. Like when she said she reached over and grabbed his hand, she said, she was like, "There's no way I could have jumped up and grabbed him." She's like, "One, I didn't think he was serious." So he, him walking up to the stage, she was like, that wasn't anything abnormal for her. And she was like, and plus her dress was too heavy, so she couldn't get up anyway. Um, what else did I want to say about that? Yeah, so that was pretty much it with the slap. Now, let me just take a step back and talk about my overall thoughts about the book. I'll start with the book itself. It's a beautiful book. You guys can't really see it, but her picture, her face, is made up of a collage of pictures. So I thought that was really creative. Um, and it's really a beautiful book. It's beautiful on the outside and it's beautiful on the inside as well. Like there's a lot of red in here, I guess, reminiscent of the Red Table Talk. So, for example, like on this page where she got like red trimming and stuff like that, that's very beautiful, very, very pretty. At the end of each chapter, she kind of goes into like, I guess, like a little, she'll say a quote and then she'll kind of give like an exercise, like if you're feeling unworthy, what are some of the things that make you feel unworthy? And she kind of goes through this exercise where you can kind of write the things down, think about how they make you feel, kind of thing. So she does that after each chapter. Like I said, she does it with a quote and then she goes into this little exercise. what i what I struggled with the book, and I'm just going to talk about the content of the book. I didn't find a lot of what she said to be like, I didn't find it believable. And I talked about that at the beginning. I felt like from the beginning, I was super biased, and I mentioned that. And then I said, well, let me take a step back and just listen to it for what it is. But some of the stuff, it just didn't feel believable. And it didn't feel believable in the sense that it wasn't like, it didn't feel like what she said lined up with where she was. That makes sense. I'm trying to think of a really good example. Um, like she talked a lot about her. Here, I'll say this. She talked a great deal about being depressed, but she really didn't get down to like the basis of that depression. And she said that she was diagnosed clinically depressed, and there was a lot of stuff that could have had her down and all that, but I feel like she didn't really get to the bottom of it. And she talked about how she was prescribed medication, but then after she met Will, she stopped taking the medication. And she did allude in this one particular part, she talked about how, both of them had their own trauma. So then trying to come into a relationship where both of them were traumatized and had their own stuff that they hadn't dealt with, that was problematic and just, combustible for the relationship. And I can see that. I can definitely see that. And so maybe that was enough. Maybe that was all the foundation that she needed to give us was, things just didn't work because we both were just struggling to deal with ourselves. And we couldn't really love each other because we didn't even know how to love ourselves. I think that's probably the gist of what she was saying. Um, I found her storytelling to not really be compelling. Like I said, when she talked about her children and mothering, that was like the most connected I felt to the book. I think when she talked about her career, I literally had to pause and think about all the movies that she was in. And was like, man, she did do that. When she talked about being in the band, I was like, oh, she did have that. So she did some really cool stuff. And I think a lot of her struggles was probably more internal than they were external. Like, it wasn't like people were doing stuff to her, or it wasn't like Will did something to her, like to make her feel, angry towards him or whatever. And I didn't even know that she was angry towards him. It was just like this disconnect, and it came off very much through this book. Like I said, she talked about Tupac more than she talked about anybody, and she certainly talked about him more admirably than she did talk when she talked about Will. She talked about Will very, very little in the book. I mean, every time she talked about him, it was most times, I don't say every time, most times she talked about him, it was in the like he did this wrong kind of mindset. And so that wasn't, that was kind of the overall takeaway from with regards to how she described Will and talked about Will in a book. um, I seen on Saturday Night Live, they did a skit where, the girl was just like kept talking about Tupac or whatever. And she talked about Tupac like a lot in this book. And she talked about him in ways that it didn't even make sense for her to talk about him as much as she did. Um, so after a while, it's just start kind of feeling weird. Like, if you're going to tell the story, tell the story. This was your relationship or whatever. So I thought that was kind of odd the way she talked about him. I did mention also that there were a lot of parallels. I told you guys that I read Will's book. I'm actually listening to his book now, and there were a lot of parallels with regards to some of the same, and not even the same characters while they're married, but like just their upbringing. Her growing up in Baltimore, him growing up in Philadelphia. There was some language that they, kind of shared across the books, the way that it was written, like stories that was shared. For example, Will shared a story in his book where he had a girlfriend from school who I think her aunt put her out or something. So he came to his mother's house and begged him, or came to his mother and begged her to let the girlfriend stay. Jada shared a similar story. Tupac, wanted to get out of his house and his neighborhood. I guess the guys were trying to pick on him or whatever. And she came to her house and begged her mother for Tupac to be able to stay. That was like one story, but it was a couple of stories that was like that where it was just kind of interesting that they, shared similar stories. And like I said before, I think Jada kind of looked at his book as a blueprint and maybe was like, oh, I'm gonna tell a story similar to that, and kind of did it that way. Um, what else? I love the fact of like her sharing about a lot of the people that she had come in contact with, like within Hollywood. And I forgot to share with you guys. She talked about Prince, wanting her to help him on a video or something. So apparently, she like produced or directed some videos in her career as well. I thought that was pretty cool. Um, what else? I don't know. She did talk a lot about the alopecia thing, and she, talked about how her hair was falling out, and why she ended up just shaving it off because it was just coming out, and that was kind of her, making peace with it, just shaving her head and just kind of being done with it, and not having to deal with the hair shedding and all that stuff. Um, yeah, I think if I would give the book. Let's do this out of 5 stars, like 1 out of 5 stars. I would or out of 5 stars, I would probably give it a 2. Um, I didn't find the stories to be really interesting. Um, I didn't find the points that she was making to be really deep. I feel like she thought that they were being really deep, and so she would tell a story, and then she would do, like I shared with you guys, do this little thing at the end of each chapter. And it just didn't resonate. Like, the depth of the message that she was trying to get through really didn't line up with the story that she told, or didn't really express that virtue or whatever it was that she was trying to share at the end. So I found like there was a disconnect there. I personally enjoy. I wish she would have spent more time talking about like her career, and things that she's done. I did not get even through the story. Like, right now, she seems to try to present herself, and I don't want to say try, but she seems to present herself as this spiritually enlightened person. But her book really doesn't support that. Like, I didn't see um, anywhere where she just, like, really got any deep, real revelation. It was almost like it felt more like, "Oh, I'm just not gonna deal with that." It felt more like pushing things off, pushing things down, not gonna deal with that, not gonna give it my energy, that kinda thing, as opposed to really being, um growing through something. So I don't know. She talked about when she, turned 50 and how she was nervous at first, but then she just kind of was like, look, you're 50, and I guess that was a new leaf for her to turn over as well. I personally, like I said, I would give it a two, but I really wish she would have spent more time talking about her career because I think people have to be reminded of her career. Like when she talked about that little part, I was like, man, she did do that. Wow, she was in that. Because it was easy for her to kind of get lost in Will and all of his, Hollywood stuff. But I think that she really did do a lot. And I think even her as a parent, I think that's beautiful. I love how she talked about the relationships that she has with other women in Hollywood because, you really don't see that. I love she talked about her relationship with Queen Latifah, with excuse me, MC Light, her relationship with Nia Long. Um, who else? Like she, has like long-standing relationships with people. She talked about this was a really interesting part. She talked about having a conversation with Ruby D, who, as you guys know, was married to Ozzy Davis, and they were like this, kind of a Will and Jada kind of couple where they did business together. They were in Hollywood together, making movies and all that stuff. Although Will and Jada never really worked together in that way, but they did produce and all that stuff together. But nonetheless, she said she was talking to Ruby D, and Ruby D came over to her, and at this point, Ozzie Davis had already passed, and Ruby D came over to her and was like, "You don't have to make it. You don't have to try to make it look this easy." And she was like, "What do you mean?" She was like, I know that it's not easy." Um, and she's like, "Well, do you have any regrets?" This is Jada asking Ruby D because obviously she was able to see past her facade of trying to act like everything was good. And Ruby D having been, in a similar situation where her husband was this big time movie person and all this, she was like, "You don't have to try to make it look easy." And so Jada was like, "So do you have any regrets?" And she said, I regret that I didn't laugh more, that we didn't laugh together more." And she was like, "And the things that we argued about, you know, I regret that we didn't just laugh more and argue less kind of thing." And she was like, "Because the things that we argued about, ultimately we end up laughing about." And I thought that was pretty interesting. And then she talked about Pauletta Washington, of course, Denzel Washington's wife, and she had a similar conversation with her. And she was like, because people forget that Pauletta had this whole career before Denzel, and so she, kind of fell in Denzel's shadow, and I guess Jada kind of felt like she fell in Will's shadow. Um, and so she said it was, really good talking to these other women who had these big Hollywood husbands who, who also had their own careers and had to try to find themselves or navigate their own career in the shadow of their husband's careers or whatever. So she said that kind of helped her to put things in a better perspective. At the end of the book, she still didn't say whether her and Will are back together. So I'm assuming that they are still just, doing life together. Um, so yeah, I guess they're just kind of doing life together. I'm trying to think if there was anything else I wanted to say about it. Yeah, yeah, I mean, that was really it. Like I said, I wish it would have been a little more about her and her career, and I think it would have been better. I would say this if she did talk about because this is what the people want to know. People are this interested in you and Tupac. Like Tupac has been gone for almost 30 years, and people are not really interested in that. Everything that we needed to know about you and Tupac, I think everybody's already heard. So maybe spend a smidget of time talking about that, but then use the rest of the book. Like this book is huge. It is 400 plus pages. Then use the rest of the book and really just talk about your career, talk about your life with Will, talk about whatever the issues were, talk about those things. Like you have 400 plus pages to like really tell 405 pages to really tell an in-depth story. The fact that you talked very little about Will, I think, did the book a disservice. The fact that you talked so much about Tupac, I think, did the book a disservice. The fact that you didn't talk more, like I would have loved her to talk more about just her journey, like in some real concrete way that made sense, that helped you to follow along with the story. But I felt like she was just kind of jumping all over the place. And I just think that she really didn't tell anybody anything that we already didn't know. Um, and I think that really is it for me. Hopefully, I don't know if you guys are planning on reading the book. I mean, I have no no, no advice either way. Like I said, 405 pages, 11 plus hours, if you're listening to it via Audible. Um, her telling the story, even listening to it, is not that interesting. And it's unfair because I literally, if you guys know, I'm actually spending the rest of the year. I was just kind of doing a lot of reading, and so I wasn't going to do any memoirs. But I had Will Smith's book, I had Viola Davis's book, then Kerry Washington came out with her book, and then Jada's book. So I did Will Smith, Viola Davis, Kerry Washington, then Jada's. I didn't review the other books, but now I'm listening to Will Smith's book on Audible, and it is so much fun. Like I'm laughing, like I'm driving down the road, I'm cracking up. He is such a great storyteller, and then listening to it in comparison to just finishing Jada's is like night and day. So I would say if you're going to listen to a story, and I didn't get far enough in his book, um, but I don't think he taught. I think his book came out before the slap, so there. I don't think there's anything in there about the slap, and I didn't get into anything with regards to like any infidelity or anything like that. But I'm still, I'm still just enjoying the story. Where I'm at with his book, he's still just kind of talking about his Fresh Prince of Bel Air days. So that's where I'm at right now. But yeah, her book, I wish her all of God's blessings. Like I think she is certainly on a journey, as we all are. I think she is, really, I think searching spiritually, which I think most people often are. I think she's very explorative about it, very open about, her spiritual endeavors. Um, but yeah, I don't know. If you guys have read the book, if you guys have listened to the book, I'm curious to know your thoughts. Like, what did you feel? Was there a part in the book that really resonated with you? Is there something that I'm missing? Did you have a different perspective if you listened to the book, if you read it? Did you go into I think this is more it, did you go into it with a particular mindset and then leave feeling differently? I think that's what I did. I definitely went into it kind of like giving her the side eye. And the first few chapters was tough, but then when I kind of sat back and really started listening to it, I was like, okay, I really did appreciate or do appreciate her journey. I appreciate her sharing it. I just wish that she would have been a little more open, a little more honest. Um, because if you're going to do a memoir, why not be, right? Like, why not be open and honest? Why still hide behind this, this facade? So those were kind of my thoughts. Um, yeah, those were kind of my thoughts. So yeah, I was trying to think if there's anything else, but I'm going to wrap it up here. That was it. Hopefully you guys like the review. If you haven't seen part one, it is posted on under the same. It's going to be posted under the same. Oh, what is the thing called, guys? Playlist. So it's posted under the same playlist. If you want to get the book, go ahead and get the book. It really wasn't that interesting. I may go through. Oh, and I will say the inside is really beautiful too. It's like full with all these different pictures, which I think is absolutely beautiful. So that's pretty cool. And she do have Will in a picture, so she ain't completely ice him out of the book. And I think I love how she did it here, as opposed to, a lot of people have like the section in the middle of the book with a lot of pictures, but I love that she kind of did the cover, the inside cover, front and back with pictures. So it's pretty cool. Anywho, that is pretty much it, guys. Took a way more time than I expected, but hope you guys enjoyed this review. If there's a book that you want me to review, let me know, because I kind of enjoyed these book reviews. It was a lot more interesting to kind of, come back, read it, and come in and talk about it a little bit as well. I may do a review for Kerry Washington's book too, because I did read that and I did have I had some thoughts. So I may do a review of her book as well. But I don't think I'm going to read any more memoirs for the rest of the year. I'm going to continue to stick with my regular fiction and just kind of keep moving from there. But thank you guys so much for, taking this journey with me as I read this book. It's funny, when I first seen that she was releasing a book, I kind of posted because people were like going in on the comments. I was like, don't worry about it. I'll read it for us all. I'll take one for the team, read it, and give you guys my thoughts. So hopefully my thoughts were helpful. Hopefully you guys, got something out of it. And yeah, so thanks for letting me interrupt your day, guys. And thanks for, joining me on this journey. So blessings, guys.